Thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Michelle Tam and I am one of the marketing managers at ISA Cybersecurity. Thank you for joining us today for our panel discussion that is titled How to Leverage SIEM to Modernize Your Security Operations. And joining us are esteemed panelists and thought leaders from IDC Canada, IBM Security, and ISA Cybersecurity. Before we begin the discussion, I'd like to share a few housekeeping notes. First, this event is being recorded and you will receive access to the recorded webinar after the event. Second, there will be time for a Q&A at the end, so please put your questions in the Q&A feature in the bar below and note which panelist the question is for. We'll do our best to get to everybody's questions, but if we run out of time, we'll send a follow-up email with answers to the unanswered questions. Third, there is a chat function enabled in the same bar below. We encourage you to interact with the other guests in the chat function, but please ensure any questions that you have for the panelists, you submit them through the Q&A function. If you have any other questions about the webinar, they can be posted in the chat. I also now have the pleasure of introducing to you our moderator, Yogesh Shivhare. Yogesh is a senior analyst at IDC Canada within the Infrastructure Solutions and the Security Research team. He manages the cybersecurity research and provides insight and analysis into industry and technology trends as they shape the Canadian security market. His research focus enables him to support Canadian technology providers by identifying key market trends in the cybersecurity space. Over to you, Yogesh.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for the generous introduction. And I'm very happy to be here, looking forward to a very exciting panel discussion. And with that, let me just go over to our panelists and have them introduce themselves. Let's start with Daina. Daina, you're on mute.
My apologies. Good morning. Pleasure to be here. My name is Daina Proctor. I am the Canadian National Lead for IBM Security Intelligence and Threat Management Practice. Thank you, Yogesh.
Thank you, Daina. Now let's go over to Ricardo.
Hey everyone, I'm Ricardo. I'm a senior security engineer for ISA. I've been with ISA for 2 years, but I've been working like SIEM solutions for almost a decade. So anyways, it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, Ricardo. It's our pleasure to have you here. And last but definitely not the least, Bruce.
Thank you, Yogesh. It's Bruce White. I'm Vice President of Sales at ISA Cybersecurity. I'm in my 21st year in cybersecurity and about 11 plus years on kind of SIEM-SOC. So look forward to the panel discussion today.
Great, Bruce. We're excited to have you here and draw upon that long tenure that you had in this industry. So we have a lot to cover today. So without wasting any time, let's get on straight to it. And I would just like to say, these days I've been attending a lot of sessions and webinars, and almost everything starts today with something about the pandemic. About how the businesses around the world have responded to it, and how the future of work has changed potentially forever. But today, I'm not going to delve too much on that, but as market researchers, what we have observed is that organizations, no matter which stage of business situation they are in, they've either slowed down or reprioritized their critical IT initiatives. 8 months ago, when the world was dealing with the first wave of pandemic, we asked the worldwide IT decision makers the business stage that they associated themselves with, and what were the most important IT skills that their organization needed for recovery. What we found out was that whether the organization is heading down the curve, going through recession, or on the path to recovery, cybersecurity is the biggest focus to deliver digital resiliency. Now, organizations have accelerated the adoption of digital technologies to maintain business continuity, reduce operating costs, or capture market share, depending on at what stage of business situation they are in. But this has led to a very hurried adoption of digital transformation initiatives like cloud services, remote work, digital delivery of services to customers, which has resulted in a significant change to the existing IT environments. And when that happens, especially when the innovation is not incremental, it tremendously drives up complexity. And in the cybersecurity research area, we say that complexity is the #1 enemy of cybersecurity and thus of digital resiliency. In March 2021, we asked Canadian organization through an IDC end user survey the number of cybersecurity attacks and data breaches they experienced in the last 12 months. And the average number of cyber attacks stood at 112, and an average Canadian organization experienced 2 data breaches. Now, these numbers are astonishing, especially considering the fact that these numbers just represent the most conservative estimate, as most of the attacks and breaches, they go undetected for months or even forever. And the cost associated with these breaches is massive, and it can escalate quickly into millions of dollars. And that too, if you just consider costs around which are associated with responding, recovering, and downtime due to the incident. But there are other costs like damage to reputation, loss of customers, and tainted partner relationships that are difficult to quantify, but nonetheless can cause permanent damage. So the next logical question is, what can a CISO do to improve their cybersecurity capabilities? And let's look at the next slide. Well, as businesses evolve, reliance on perimeter-based security controls have shown serious limitations. CISOs around the world, they have put their faith into sophisticated multi-layer prevention control, and still breaches happen. Security leaders have come to terms with the fact that only prevention controls are not enough, and early detection and response capabilities are key when dealing with sophisticated attacks. These security operations workflows need to modernize, and SOCs need to match the agility of the organization and also of the adversary. The biggest challenges, however, you can see on the slide, they are not new. As per IDC Canada's end user survey in March, respondents have cited that their top concerns are around budgets, skill shortage, and just the fact that staff is busy doing things that just need to occur instead of focusing on value-added activities like investigation, digital forensics, threat hunting, right? So as SOCs have evolved, so has the foundational element of the SOCs, which is the SIM. Modern SIM solutions, or call them next-gen SIM, they have evolved to address these challenges. Intelligence and analytics today are table stakes when it comes to SOC operations. Intelligence could be anything, telemetry gathered from the network. It includes sources like the batch data from applications, network flow data, curated data from threat intelligence sources. And on this intelligence, analytics complements it to find anomalies, which also refers to correlated data sets like user and entity behavior analytics, alerts aggregation, or determining configuration drifts. And additional analytics layers further refine these anomalies to reduce the alert fatigue and prioritize them for automated or manual response. That's trend #1. Secondly, orchestration is absolutely critical. As IT and security environments become complex, it is the connected layer that streamlines security processes and powers security automation. Orchestration helps an SOC move with the agility that the adversary does by quickly updating SIM filters, updating antivirus engines and firewalls with information about malware signatures, blacklisting bad websites, so on and so forth. automated functions dynamically institute playbooks. They trigger the download of proper patches and then initiate a vulnerability scan. Now, the use cases and possibilities for orchestration and automation are immense. And there's absolutely no denying that orchestration and automation in the SOC leads to significant downstream efficiency. Now, SIEM solutions have also evolved to enable automated response capabilities. They're either add-on features which are bundled within the SIEM solution, or they have the capabilities to integrate with other response solutions. And this is where orchestration plays an important role. So instead of drawing data from organizational systems, SIEM is able to perform automated changes to other organizational systems. Now, traditionally, organizations have focused on blocking and detecting known threats, but that is not enough. Increasing zero-day exploits and advanced new threats, they require organizations to adopt a proactive approach to cybersecurity. And next-gen SIEM is a powerful technology that, for example, collects and enriches logs that threat hunters can easily search while investigating potential threats. It enables advanced use cases beyond signature-based threat detection like UEBA. The use cases are many, but the bottom line is that there is a need to adopt a proactive cybersecurity strategy, which is not possible if the SOC's workflows are not modernized. Now, organizations must evaluate these use cases for their environment and leverage the expertise of their security partners wherever they can. Next slide. And in this slide, I've just summarized the recent IDC Canada survey. We asked the end users about the key benefits of engaging with a security service provider. And more than half of the respondents agree that their partners help them to maintain a better security posture than they could deliver on their own. Traditionally, end users have turned to MSSPs for cost benefit, for subscription-based pricing and compliance reporting. But however, as IT environments have become complex, with adoption of cloud, ID, and remote work, perimeter-based security controls are just not enough, which is why there is a growing focus on security strategy, monitoring, detection, and response. And end users today engage with MSSPs for their expertise and their ability to deliver a better security posture for them. And so that's pretty much the last of my slides. And now let's head towards our panel to open up this topic. All right, Bruce. So my first question is to you. And as I summarize briefly what the market situation is, but in your experience, when you talk to customers, what are the biggest concerns when it comes to SOC operations?
Well, thank you, Yogesh. Great summary and great insights into kind of what's happening within the cybersecurity market when it comes to SOC and SIEM operations. Some of the concerns that we see from our clients are in relation to volumes of alerts. So they're trying to find that needle in the haystack. So if you have too many alerts, maybe not the right log sources, use cases, it can cause a lot of noise and difficult to get the right actionable intelligence for when you're running your own SOC operations, your own SIEM solution. So if you ingest more, say, threat data or threat information, that can again cause lots of noise that needs to be tuned in order to be more effective. And some of the other areas around, do we have the clients have concerns, do we have the right use cases to match with what the threat actors may be targeting our organization, our industry? What are the underlying alerts that may be part of that? And are they being looked at regularly and refreshed? And the organization may just not have the bandwidth and personnel to be able to do that on a regular basis. And are they adjusting the right log sources? Because it's key with any use case or any alert that we have the right log sources. So if we're looking at, let's say, identity information, we have identity-based use case or alerts, do we have the correct logs? Do we have the Active Directory logs that can support that? Because if we may have the best use case, the best alerts, but if we're missing the log sources, then that's a big challenge. for the organizations. And one very large one you touched at the end is that 24/7, 365. That's a real challenge, for a lot of organizations to build to man SOC, again around the clock throughout the entire year. And it can be concerned because they may not, our clients may not necessarily have the eyes on glass or watching it, when they ideally would like to. And budget challenges are certainly an area of concern because companies don't have unlimited budgets to work with, and they need to ensure they're spending their money as cost effectively as they can. And the resource challenges within cybersecurity. I mean, there's close to 2+ million openings globally, or certainly just in North America, in cybersecurity positions. So that the clients competing for talent within the organization is a challenge. And that time and time comes up when we chat with our clients. And also regulatory compliance challenges to ensure they're collecting the right log sources so they have for storage for any of the regulatory or compliance requirements they may have. So these are just some of the concerns that we see from some of our clients regarding their SOC or SIEM operations.
Well, thank you so much for that, Bruce. Moving on to Daina. So Daina, for many years, SIEM has been foundational to SOC operations. A lot of customers that we as IDC speak to, they sometimes when they have to write SIEM, they write SIEM /SOC. So they see it as almost synonymous. But as SOC operations have changed, the workloads have become complicated. So how has SIEM evolved in recent years, in your opinion?
Yeah, wonderful question, Yogesh. And certainly I like how you said SIEM/SOC. As traditionally, a lot of people really did see if you had a SIEM, you had a security operations center, right? Inversely, the opposite way was if you were planning on running a security operations center or having a security program within your organization, you needed a SIEM. So foundationally, the SIEM is there. I think at the core of a lot, if not every single one of our security operations centers, there is the SIEM functionality because it is, right? It was log centered, it was compliance focused, and it was detection enabling. If we click our heels and go back in time, the majority of our security programs not too long ago were very focused on, did I find something? Did I bring in the right logs that I can get all of my regulatory compliance saying I am watching these assets, I am ensuring the following, right? It was very contextualized to that. Over the last few years, we are certainly seeing that evolved SOC, that next gen SOC that you mentioned. And the SIEM within that is extending beyond the signature based. It's extending beyond the event based. It's looking at flows. It's enabling the orchestration that you mentioned. It's really ensuring that we can exponentially and if not in real time, get to a response. No longer is it sufficient to say I found something. It's I found, I've acted, I've responded. I've ideally even contained, right? Those cognitive enrichments enabled through our AI and machine learning is being absolutely pulled into all of our SIEM endeavors and our activities. And I know we've got a few more sections coming forward, so I won't keep going on some of the other advancements in SIEM, but certainly foundationally, that's where I'm seeing, and a lot of our clients are seeing that a SIEM of yesterday is still foundationally needed, but it needs to do so much more.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Daina. And now let's go over to Ricardo. He is an absolute technology expert, and which is why I have this question for you, Ricardo. So there, like Daina said, the use cases are many, and there's so much to do. But what are some of the most advanced use cases that SIEM can enable today?
Yeah, so I think there is like three main trends that I would say for this year and actually for the next year. So I do think the foundation, the basis use case is still really important. So for example, testing for brute force or testing for access changes or permission changes. But there's like three trends that I see like really increasing this year and the next year. I think the first one, and probably one of the most important ones, is a user behavior analytics. Or UBA as people call. Actually, user behavior analytics has been in the market for at least 2 years, but I think it's becoming even more important last year and this year And the reason for that is because we should not focus only on rule-based detection. So like if that happened, then that happened. We should also try to understand the user behavior and like what the normal user day-to-day activity is to detect any kind of anomalies. So for example, if you see an HR person suddenly, changing a firewall rule in your firewalls, that's something really suspicious and something that we should definitely detect. And because internal threats are becoming even more important nowadays, UBA, I do think is a big trend. A second trend that I see really important is integration between SIEM solution and other external tools. So for example, your SIEM solution and your IPS solution, or your SIEM solution and your firewalls, or your SIEM solution and your vulnerability management solution. So for example, think about vulnerability management. You can have all your vulnerabilities from your vulnerability management solution into your SIEM solution. So then during investigation, you can see more information about your assets. And it can even help you to prioritize that. So for example, if you see a malicious activity in a server and that the server has some vulnerabilities, then that's a high priority, something that you should definitely investigate right now. So again, I do think integrations are really important between SIEM solutions and other solutions. And the third trend, which again is something that is becoming even stronger this year, and I think will be even stronger in the future years, is in terms of threat intelligence. So by threat intelligence, it's not only ingesting random threat intelligence feeds from the internet, but also participating in threat intelligence groups and onboarding that into your SIEM solution. So for example, let's say you work for a bank. The idea is participating in threat intelligence groups for other banks and sharing the threat information between each other. Because in this way, you can be proactive. So again, if you have threat intelligence, for example, if you know that all the other banks are being attacked by this specific group using those techniques, then you can be proactive and implement like rules in your SIEM solution or even like rules in your IPS solution to prevent that from happening in your company. So that's the biggest difference. You're not waiting to be attacked. You're actually looking what other people or other companies are facing, and you're being proactive about that. You're like implementing rules and implementing mitigations even before you're getting attacked. And I think that's, again, that's the biggest trend because we're really being proactive in that case.
Absolutely, Ricardo. Thank you so much for that. So what I hear is that number one, the end users are moving away from rule-based and signature-based detection and turning to more intelligent sources and an intelligent way of AI/ML-enabled detection. Second thing was about integration with other aspects of the SOC, and it would be right to say that the modern SIEM solutions are transforming to be sort of a control plane for the SOC operations. And third was collective threat intelligence and using the environment the way adversaries use, right, to beat them in their own game. Excellent points, Ricardo. And Daina, with that, I wanted to come back to you and hear from you. So what Ricardo has given us is some advanced use cases, but I want to understand from you, how should businesses prioritize these use cases, and what are some common pitfalls to avoid when an end user, a CISO, is looking to modernize his SOC operations?
Yeah, right. So we could talk an awful long time on how to prioritize. So I'll keep it real short. That there's two ways that I suggest prioritizing, and then I'll get into some pitfalls, and I'll use some recent examples that I've had. First is the two different ways to prioritize is one is from the top down, or the alternative, the second one is from the bottom up. And an example for that is from top down. A client that I spend an awful lot of time with has a very transient workforce. They are a retail client. As a retail client, they have considerable, as you just mentioned, Ricardo, insider threat challenges of what is an appropriate user behavior. They also have significant supply chain challenges. When we are prioritizing their use cases, we absolutely started at the top of understanding the business risk of that significant area, of that transient retail workforce and the supply chain challenge to the enablement of that business. Aligning that to a framework, whether it be right now, certainly there's a lot of really good approach to the 12 tactics in MITRE, or also the cyber kill chain, of aligning those and understanding what is the coverage that we need to ensure that the biggest risks to that retail business are covered. And then moving down from there. From there, we then got into which assets you would need, which log sources profiles you would need, the logging profile itself, the data fidelity from the sources, as well as the building blocks that you need to enable those use cases. So it really started at the top of the business risk and drove it down. The other one is a bottom up. Bottom up is, many clients have this discussion of, I know what I have in my network. I know what controls I have in place. These are the logs that I can bring in, or the net flows that I could bring, or network insights if you're in that position. And that will then enable me to see certain things. And that will enable me to have the building blocks to build against use cases and identify from that position. Money, finances, wallets are always a consideration, as well as Bruce had mentioned it at the beginning of one of his responses, as well as that alert fatigue. Being mindful to not overrunning the team that is actually going to be looking at what comes out of this does have to come into the consideration of how many alerts are you enabling within your SIEM environment. Which leads me to the last one, which you asked me, which are what are the pitfalls? Key one I think I already just mentioned was, are we collecting data and bringing in rules that create use cases for the sake of rules and use cases? Or are they actually mitigating a risk? Are they bringing you knowledge and actionable intelligence to resolve something that was actually going to be a risk to your business? That pragmatic reliance, I think, has been a really nice shift that I've been seeing, but not always. Sometimes we get into situations. I've had one client recently that created over 200 custom parsers, and they have a wealth of data coming in that we're now in the situation of having to sift through all of that to really understand what is a pragmatic use of that SIEM. So top down is ideal, bottom up is often the reality, and the pitfalls is just be mindful of what are you actually collecting and why.
Absolutely, Daina. So it's a powerful technology, and the outcome definitely depends on what goes in, right? And I like what you said, the bottom down and top up approaches. So every end users, they must look at their SOC operations and see what the current state is, and then decide how they want to approach it. Thank you so much for that, Daina. And with that, I want to come back to you, Bruce, and like Ricardo and Daina just talked about, that there are a lot of pitfalls to watch out, and there are always some hindrances in adopting new technologies, which is why a lot of end users we observe, they rely on their partners. So in your experience, what are some of the benefits that your customers have realized with a managed SIEM service?
Thanks, Yogesh. I mean, this is obviously a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So a lot of clients that look at going to a managed MSSP provider are looking for that, as I talked in the beginning, about 24/7, 365 eyes on glass. They don't have to worry about manning a SOC and having the personnel. We do all that for them, or an MSP provider would do that all for them and provide that service directly, as part of that the MSSP service offering. And managing the platform is not simply just doing potentially upgrades or updates, but it's also a lot of things we've been talking about throughout the panel discussion. It's advancing use cases. It's taking advantage of automation, orchestration activities. It's helping develop understanding, again, what are the right use cases? What are the right alerts? What are the data sources you're getting, or going after within your organization? Are those the right data sources, again, to feed what you're looking to achieve, what you're going to get out of the SIEM and out of your SOC operation? And another big area that I touched on earlier is triaging of alerts. That's another area that some clients will struggle with, because they may not necessarily have the 24/7, 365, and they look to their MSSP provider to be able to provide that triage alert. So you have the the SOC level 1 analyst, SOC level 2 analyst, and then you're only escalating incidents that need to go back to the client, or tickets that are, let you say, SEV 3 or above, that can be actioned again by that client with the contextuality around that incident or that ticket. So now they can go action it internally in the organization and know what to do. So you're helping them find, let's say, that needle in the haystack, or find that, again, actionable intelligence that can benefit them going forward. And the team of experts. That's all certainly our organization does. That's all we do. That's all we do as an organization. So you gain that expertise and leverage that expertise as part of the extension of your internal team. And then you can focus on having experts within your own organization that can take and triage those high-level alerts or high-level areas within your organization that you can utilize their expertise. They can focus on doing the investigations, doing the forensics internally, and have those skilled resources or highly skilled resources as part of the client's team. And you can manage the total cost of ownership. So you can now look at, how do I can get more predictable cost of ownership from both a service perspective, but as well as from a technology perspective. So I've got a better understanding from a budget and what I need to ask for from a budget perspective within the organization, what it's going to cost to build support that. And certainly as well as help support any of the compliance obligations that a client may be facing within their organization to be able to adhere to going forward. And I'd like now to turn it to Ricardo, because Ricardo can talk to some specific kind of use cases that may be relevant for this discussion.
Yeah, exactly. So Bruce, as you mentioned, managing a SIEM solution is more than just applying patches and onboarding log sources. That's the reality. So what we've seen before, and actually what one of the biggest benefits of managed SIEM providers is that they have a lot of expertise in how to tune the rules and ensure that you have a really low number of false positives. So I see that, like, I would say a lot of companies, they buy a SIEM solution, they install it, and they think that's it, we're done. And then 6 months later, they hire like a managed SIEM solution just to understand like what is happening there. And for example, we've seen cases where they had more than 400 incidents per day, like tickets a day, because they had no tuning in the rules at all. But when you have a managed SIEM provider, we know, I don't know, like we know exactly how the rules should be tuned and how the which use cases are more valuable for the clients. So for example, we had a reduction from 400 plus tickets a day to around between 15 to 30 tickets a day. So again, that's a massive reduction, right? So if you have 400 tickets a day, there's no team that's going to be able to manage that and going to be able to investigate that. But if you have 15 to 30 a day, then your team's much more likely to be able to investigate that and find the threats. And again, when you have a managed SIEM provider, your team, your company can focus on investigating incidents. You don't have to worry about patching. You don't have to worry about tuning rules or all those things. Like your team, your internal security team can focus on what is really important for you, which is investigating incidents. So.
Well, thank you for that, Ricardo and Bruce. And absolutely, what you just said, and if I was a security analyst, this would be music to my ears. If there is a way I can bring down 500, 600 tickets per day down to 50 and 30. Yeah. I mean, I would have my pupils dilated right now. Thank you for that, Ricardo. And it looks like we jumped to questions. I want to come back to you, Daina, and pick your brain on something which we observe in the cybersecurity industry, especially in the research side of it. And we hear new technologies, new acronyms being spun off every day, terms like XDR or SOAR, etc. So in your opinion, what is the difference between these technologies, and how should end users decide what is suitable for their security operations?
Yeah, what a wonderful question. In the IT industry, I think we have we make acronyms out of everything. And honestly, I admit myself to at times having to Google to say, well, what does that new one mean? And what is Gartner's description? What is IDC's description? What is a comment? What does Wikipedia say, right? So it only makes sense that a lot of the XDR, EDR, SOAR, SIM, you can get a little confused by it all, right? And if XDR is fairly new, relatively, and from a security sense, it's focusing on extending the detection and response. So it's an extended detection and response, a cross-layer functionality that's aiming at collecting and automating correlation of data across the multiple security layers that then enable the cloud networks that you were speaking of, Ricardo, the endpoints, the emails, the network assets, to all be cohesively brought into one, with the premise of being able to be detected faster so that your analysts can then investigate and respond. Sounds similar, doesn't it, to a SIEM, right? A SIEM equally can pull in those cross-layer, can certainly collect and automatically respond. The evolved SIEM is enabling that response element. So there is naturally concern, conflict between, you mentioned SOAR as well. SOAR from a security orchestration, automation, and response perspective, the lines are getting a bit more blurred between what traditionally was a SOAR tool and how a SOAR integration now with a SIEM is in a lot of our security operations programs. In my experience and the clients that I've worked with is certainly when they've made investments into a SIEM, that investment is far more than the technology and the integration points that right, Ricardo and Bruce also mentioned, and those are significant and they're very business enabled integration points. They're also heavily brought in from a playbook perspective, runbook perspective into their security operations. That's not child's play, right? Ripping and replacing that to move to a XDR solution didn't make sense for any of the clients that I work with. Moving to an evolution of an XDR, certainly with an integration point of a QRadar, for example, the integration points that a SIEM like QRadar provides are leading, right? They really reduce any of your operational activity and your tasks, not only to get in, but to stay and to maintain. So the XDR solution hasn't been one that I've yet really found the sweet spot for with the client base that I talk to, because majority of clients that I talk to are established. And if they haven't got an established security operations center, they usually have an established log aggregation point, even if it's from just a log aggregation and not a SIEM. Getting to an objective, knowing that the evolved SIEM of a QRadar with a SOAR integration, such as Resilient, gets them further. Been my experience so far, Yogesh.
Well, awesome. So yeah, there has to be a sweet spot of for every technology, and it all depends on what your own home ground looks like, right? All right. So technology evangelists around the world, they have all said that cloud is the next focal point for all digital innovation. So we want to understand from our panelists, and I'll come to each one of you with this question, that how is the adoption of cloud impacting the SIEM, and what is the advice that you would give users who are evaluating SIEM solutions on cloud versus SIEM solutions on premise? And let me start with Ricardo, and then I can hear it from Daina and Bruce.
Yeah, so I think the cloud, the SIEM on cloud, it definitely has like a lot of advantages. Like there's no questions about that. You don't have to worry about patching. You don't have to worry about updates or platform management or hardware or anything like this. So cloud SIEM solutions, it has a lot of benefits. And again, because you don't have to worry about patching upgrades and hardware, you can have your team focus on what is really important for you, which is again, investigating incidents and finding threats, right? But as any project, I would say, like for any company, they should evaluate, the benefit, the pros and cons of having on cloud or having on-prem. On cloud is definitely suitable for, I would say, maybe 80% of the companies, but it's not for 100% of the companies. So for example, cloud solutions, again, are really good if you wanna not worry about patching and if you wanna have a team that are focused on threats. But on the other hand, for example, let's say you need to do some very advanced customizations, or you have to, I don't know, do some data mining with the data. Or for example, if you have a requirement that your data must stay in your own environment, then in that case, maybe on-prem SIEM solutions are better for you. So as any, as any project and any solution, my best recommendation is like, when you're thinking about implementing a SIEM solution, understand what are the benefits of each side, like having on-prem versus on cloud. But more important than the benefits is understanding the limitations of each one of them. So understanding, okay, what cloud can do that on-prem cannot do, and what on-prem can do that cloud cannot do. And I think understanding the limitations is gonna tell you to say, okay, I can go for cloud, or I can, have on-prem. But again, each company is a company, and like everyone should try to understand the benefits and again the limitations before implementing that.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. Daina, your point of view on this subject.
Yeah. So I'll just talk about three considerations, certainly, in so much that every organization right now that I'm speaking with and working with has a form of cloud, right? It's not hybrid cloud. Gone. There are no more all fully on-prem, but moving forward, they're in a state of flux. So the three elements of that I would be looking at it. One is the SIEM functionality itself. Second one is the cost consideration, and third one is their security operational capabilities. First, for the SIEM functionality, don't compromise. Installing on cloud or having a SIEM as a service should not come with any compromise, right? All the feature functionality of what you can have on-prem, on bare metal servers, should be equally provided on-prem, on cloud or as a service. And if there's any degradation in the feature set, I would strongly encourage you to keep looking. The second one is cost consideration. Cost consideration of sometimes as a service costs more because, as Ricardo was mentioning, they're providing it as a service. They're doing things more than simply giving you licensing to the SIEM. Also, if you are installing it onto a cloud yourself, onto a VM of a various cloud, IBM hybrid cloud, IBM public cloud, or what have you, or Azure or AWS, what have you, there will be some cost considerations. Don't be blind to those. Look into those. Scratch the surface. Sometimes you get it free for purchase or free with purchase, but the costs are hidden somewhere else. So scratch the surface and find out where they are. Third one is your security operations capabilities. You may have practitioner strength. You may have the administrative capabilities, but is that the right use, right? Can you do the same effort, but for cheaper if you're using a SIEM as a service, for example? QRadar on cloud is, because we make it an acronym, it's a QROC deployment, and QROC does come with all of the administration and patching it, what have you, for dollars or cents to the dollar of what you would have to do if you had an admin doing it. So the functionality, don't compromise. Cost consideration, look at all of them. And then your operational capabilities. Make sure you're using your team to the best of their capabilities and relative to what else is available. Thanks, Yogesh.
Thank you so much, Daina. So, Bruce, coming back to you with your views on the same subject.
Well, thank you, Yogesh. And certainly my panelists have done a great job articulating some of the kind of pros and cons of cloud versus on-prem. And I would say that given, not to use the pandemic, but given with the pandemic over the last year, 12, 14 months now and continue on, companies have really driven a lot of their workloads, a lot of their data, gone to a lot more SaaS-based applications than they may have gone to a few years ago. So it's really driven that premise, and then had them really evaluate how their SOC is working, or how the SIEM solution they're using today is it meeting their needs? Is it providing the actual intelligence they're looking for? Is it easy to manage, et cetera? Are they getting the value out of it? So I think when you look at, and I agree with my colleagues, is that certainly you got to pay close attention to your requirements. Because if you go with an on-prem solution, you may get robust capabilities, might take more care and feeding. You go with a cloud solution, you'll end up maybe give up some requirements. And I think it's really important, our capabilities. It's really important to understand, where are your log sources? Where are your data sources? Are they in a hybrid cloud? Do you have some in Azure? Do you have some in AWS? Do you have some in your own private cloud? What's the best way to get gain access to that information? Do I need to parse data? If I do a lot of parsing, I might be limited with a cloud solution versus an on-prem. So really got to consider that, because you may some of the cloud solutions are newer. They look more fresher, but underneath them they have the right capabilities you're looking for. So we really got to focus on that. And what Daina mentioned about cost and budget is very important, because when you go with the solution that you don't have to do any maintenance on, where the SaaS provider provides all that for you, there could be a higher cost from the subscription or licensing cost. That could be from a total cost of ownership, might be higher investment over the long term. So really got to look at those considerations. And what are you looking to gain from your SIM now? If you want to go to the next generation of a SIM solution or within your SOC, what are you looking to achieve? What are you hoping to achieve? What's working, what's not working today? And really look at those considerations close, because not one size fits all, and really pay close attention to that, because it's a big investment in time and energy to move from what you're doing today to something different or augment it. So ensure you do your homework, I would say, would be my main premise or my main recommendation or suggestion. Thank you, Yogesh.
Thank you, Bruce. And once again, I want to thank all the panelists for extremely insightful discussion. And with that, we will now open the floor for questions. There are questions coming in the Q&A section already. And for all those who have joined us today, if there are any questions that you would like to put it out to our panelists, put them in the Q&A section, and we'll try to answer as many as we can today. So our first question, this question is for Ricardo, and the question is, having all the logs in SIM makes the scenario very messy. So what are some of the infrastructure areas or logs that must definitely be in SIEM and the analyst should look after? And what are the key areas where we should pay we should definitely pay more attention to?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Thanks, Sanjay. That's actually a really good question. A lot of companies, they install a SIEM solution and they're like, okay, bring all the logs, bring everything that we can onboard. But the reality is that we should only onboard logs that have security value for us. So for example, what is authentication logs are logs that bring a lot of value to you, or for example, accounts changes, or any kind of anything that can give you an indication of an attack. Operational logs, for example, I don't know, this CPU usage or memory usage or things like this, usually doesn't make too much doesn't bring too much security value. And you should only onboard if you have a use case. I'm a big believer that you should first think about the use case and then you should onboard the logs. So for example, before onboarding all the logs, you should think, okay, what are the use cases that I'm trying to bring here? So for example, let's say my first use case, I want to tackle brute force attacks, for example. So once I define that I want to tackle brute force attacks, I should understand, okay, to detect brute force attacks, I need to get authentication logs, I need to get my firewall logs, I need to get this log and that log. And once you have that list, that shopping list, then you can go and start to onboard your log sources and make sure you have all those logs. But I think, again, the bottom line is you should get all the logs that have a security value. So for example, your security tools, your firewall, IPS, and all those things, and all the kind of authentication logs for operational systems, and any logs that bring a security value. Trying to onboard everything is messy. As you said, it is started messy. So again, try to think about use cases, and from the use cases, you try to identify which log sources you're gonna onboard. I think that's a good practice.
Thank you, Ricardo. And our next question is that what are some of the mistakes with respect to SIEM that you see happening again and again and again? And this one is not directed to anyone, so I'm going to start with Daina.
Okay. Challenges that we see, or mistakes that I see over and over and over again. I guess I'll just start, from a SIEM perspective, is the expectation that they can set a SIEM and forget it. Right? Installing it, having it work, having transition done, move into steady state, and not accounting for the fact that it needs to be constantly looked at. And not constantly looked at because it goes wrong. Looked at because in the context of your business, the rules that are triggering are going to change. The environment that you are in is evolving or changing or being removed. You're divesting, you're acquiring, you're onboarding new resources, you're onboarding new cloud presence. We need to be revising based on that. We see time and time again that there's an expectation that the rules that we use to build towards the use cases 6 months ago, a year ago, 18 months ago, are what we need today. So setting and forgetting is the biggest challenge that I see over and over. Constantly evaluating, or at least on a regular basis, evaluating your rule set for their effectiveness, making sure that they're looking at all of your log sources. The rule set are not just based on a subset of log sources, and contextualizing that back to the business, I think is the biggest problem that I'm seeing from a SIM perspective over and over again.
Thank you so much, Daina. And Bruce and Ricardo, may I get your views on what are some of the most common mistakes that you see your clients do again and again with respect to SIM? Bruce, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I can go. Great question. And I think just touching on what Daina said is that is really, we touched on it earlier, is understanding your requirements. So if you're had a SIM, now you want to go, remove that, go away from that SIM, go to a different SIM tool. You want to ensure you really understand your requirements in detail as you can be, because and then what the outcome you're hoping to achieve. So what's not working today with your current environment? What do you hope to achieve by moving? Because sometimes I've seen clients just port the same issues from the old environment to the new environment, and nothing changes. And SIM, no matter how advanced maybe the machine learning or other aspects get, or around automation or orchestration, it still needs to be looked at. It still needs some TLC, let's call it, because as Dan said, your environment's changing, your use of it, the types of threats are changing. So it's not a static tool that you can leave. You really need to keep on it. But I think the main area that I see clients that you can see the same mistakes is just not really understanding kind of where you want to go and what the outcome you're hoping to achieve when you move to a new solution. Ricardo?
Yeah, I think you guys both cover like a really important point, which is SIM solution, it does require someone looking into it and taking care of it, like some TLC. It is a good point on that one. To complement on that, I do think it is necessary to have people in your company focus on tuning rules and making sure you have a low number of false positives and etc. So another really big mistake that I see, and I see like all the time, is that a lot of people, they install a SIM solution and they want to enable everything at the same time. Like I just got my new, IBM Curator, I got my new SIM solution. I'm going to enable all the roles and hope for the best. It is really easy to get overwhelmed on that. You're going to get a lot of false positives. Your team going to get overwhelmed. People are going to start to hate the tool, and it is a mess. So my main advice in this case is doing a phased approach. So for example, you just install a SIM solution, select, 10 use cases or 10 different rules, tune them, and then enable them, and then run them for a few days, and then go for the next 10. And then for the next 10 and the next 10. Again, if you try to enable like 100 rules out of the box and the team is not familiar with the tool, people are just gonna go crazy. So, try to go a phased approach. I'm gonna check, the 10 most important use cases, gonna try to do them this week. Gonna make sure my team is, aware of that, and make sure that the rules are tuning, and make sure that is good, training around those use cases. Then you go for the next 10, then you go for the next 10. So again, it is easy to get overwhelmed with a SIM solution, but if you tackle in a phased approach, I think you're gonna do way better.
All right, thank you so much, panelists. And we have time for one last question. I'm gonna take it to Daina. So this is a forward-looking question, which is aimed at the evolution of SIM. And Lenny is asking that we've seen addition of XDR, UEBA, SOAR to enhance SIM's capabilities over time. But what is the next capability that SIM needs to develop or mature given the changing landscape? So what's next for SIM? Daina, you're on mute.
Double mute twice. I'm so sorry. I hope I don't get to just pick one evolution, because there's so many. Again, coming back, and I think this is a great question to tie it back to the onset, right? Is that foundational element that a SIM is in all of our security programs. And long live the SIM. The SIM is not going away because of that functionality evolution. If there's areas that I would be looking at, Lanny, on where it is developing and maturing, are in a few different areas. One, it has to continue to evolve for the integrations, right? The custom parser days need to get less and less, being mindful to the security value in some of them. The other side, though, is the output from a SIEM. We've all mentioned it at some point, is the fatigue from the number of alerts. Integrating machine learning, integrating some cognitive engines from an AI perspective on learning your environment so that those are not the false positives being generated out to you, but in a transparent method by which the administrators can control. Right? It's not a black hole by which alerts just are suddenly thresholds are shifted or rules are altered. I do think we need to get into a better place. I know that from an IBM perspective, it is part of our services that we add on top of SIEM, but it is naturally being integrated with a number of SIEMs, especially from the QRadar. The last that I'll mention, because I know my colleagues probably have ideas on this one as well, is the enablement out to response and recovery. That enablement with the SOAR, as well as out into a reporting method, is becoming more commonplace and is becoming more required by all of our clients and all of our industries. So those would be the areas that I would say that from a short-term perspective where SIEM needs to go to, are enabling the onset, what comes out, and how we're reporting from it as well.
Thank you so much, Daina. And Lenny, I hope that answers your question. We have a few other questions lined up, but unfortunately we don't have the time to go over these now. But rest assured, all those who have asked us questions, we'll get back to you over email and try to answer your question to the best of our capabilities. With that, I want to thank my panelists again for a very insightful and wonderful discussion. And over to you, Michelle, for closing remarks.
Awesome. Thank you, Yogesh, and thank you to all the panelists for your remarks and your insights and sharing it with everybody today. So thank you to everyone for attending this live panel on how to leverage SIEM to modernize your security operations. We'd love to hear your feedback on the event so we can always deliver an improved cybersecurity and just content for you. Please complete the survey. You will see the survey when you close the Zoom browser. It will show up in your normal browser. And it will only take about 2 minutes, and your responses are completely anonymous. If you complete the survey by April 28th, as a token of our appreciation, you will receive a $10 gift card for Starbucks. Thank you and have a great day. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to reach out to us at info@isacybersecurity.com. And we'll also be sending you a follow-up email with the webinar on demand for you to view at your own leisure, and also some resources like a client success story for you to see how we've worked together to really help client address similar challenges that you might also see in your SIEM or SOC. Thank you, everyone.